Greetings. This is Rosalind Parks with National Network View News. Dr. Akili joins us tonight to discuss public concerns about the various COVID-19 variants, future strains, and mounting evidence that vaccinated people are the majority spreaders. GlobalView contributor Brian E. Muhammad will also join us. He's the Final Call news staff writer, and he brings light to the various US sanctions around the globe and instability in Haiti. Before we get into the top news, let's do a recap of the current events we've recently covered. On the I Have a Testimony show, NNV News anchor Willie Muhammad re-aired the special broadcast with guest Risa Islam. Their conversation covered information still relevant today, including the COVID-19 pandemic, medical exemptions, and the impact of COVID-19 as schools open up to the public.
As these children facilities and schools are starting to be reopened, what advice would you give to parents and those who are watching that when they are faced with the dilemma when the school system and other places of work want them to take the vaccinations, what could be what are some of their courses of action that they can take or we can take?
Yes, sir. First thing is, depending on what state you are in, meaning out of the 50 states in the United States, depending on which one you are in will let you know which exemptions you have. There are 3 exemptions, meaning 3 different forms or 3 different reasons that you can give the government or the school district so that your child will not be forced to take vaccinations. One of those is the medical exemption form. The other is the philosophical exemption form. The other is the religious exemption form. As of right now, California, Mississippi, and West Virginia are the only 3 states that do not have the religious, and I believe they worked on the other 2 as well. But for the other 47 states, they, for the vast majority, have all 3.
I spoke with GlobalView contributor and Final Call news staff writer Brian E. Muhammad about the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's press conference held days after the tragedy of 9/11 in 2001. One of the things that we notice in the media is the lies that come out about the things that they claim minister has said, as well as the lies about what they claim the Nation of Islam stands for. Would you say that the minister, in calling them heroes, in that instance, has shown us by example that we could rise above any personal issues that we have during a great time of tragedy and come together?
Yes, yes. And you know, and it's very important because that sentiment is the crux of the problem that the United States government, with its sordid history of oppression against Black people, its oppression against the red, its oppression against the brown, its oppression against poor whites, and the dirt that it has done worldwide, that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has been a faithful warner to America to change course.
Asiatic Mind students Sister Sanaya Muhammad and Brother Nicholas Muhammad spoke about how they are connecting with their instructors and classmates and showing great interest in a variety of subjects. Nicholas, we'll go to you first. Give us some tips on how you stay focused in the online classroom and avoid distractions.
Well, first of all, you need to find a quiet space with no distractions and a place where you usually do work. I usually just go and do my work in the basement because it's quieter there. And another one is the key is I usually don't have anything else on my table except laptop, notebooks, pencils, and other materials that are used for schoolwork, and nothing more than that.
Okay. GlobalView contributor Brian E. Muhammad, Final Call news writer, discussed 20 years of war in Afghanistan and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's October 2002 letter to President George W. Bush regarding America's warmongering. After the bombing of the World Trade Center in New York, then President George W. Bush accused the Taliban of sheltering Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, and they also claimed that they were responsible for the tragedy. After 20 years of war, was Bush's allegations ever proven?
Well, you know, yeah, they accused Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda, and yes, they did accuse the Taliban of sheltering Osama bin Laden, you know, against being held accountable for this accusation for 9/11, and they used that as a pretext, you know, as a false flag, in fact, to go into Afghanistan and go to war in Afghanistan, and to use this as a pretext for this so-called war on terror.
Medical contributor Dr. Akili Muhammad discussed public concerns about the COVID-19 variants, future strains, and mounting evidence that vaccinated people are the spreaders. Now, should the public be worried about this and the future strains at all?
Well, like I say, you know, if anybody has been infected, and, you know, to me, I think it's very difficult for anybody in the world, again, as I said before, unless you live in very remote places. If you live in any type of congested urban area, you probably have been exposed to it. Okay. And so if you have been sick from the coronavirus, any of the strains, any of the mutations, or if you have been exposed and your body fought it off, you are very well protected. And it's been shown in many parts of the world that a person who has been infected has much better antibody and much better protection than any vaccine. And we're talking about all the different vaccines around the world. They are not comparing to your natural immunity. So we have to go back to believing in God, understanding that our immune system came from God. So if you do the things that takes care of that, or you've been infected and you got over it, you're protected. So, you know, fear should go down. Continue to be careful, but fear should go down and our confidence should go up that we're going to be okay.
Previously on NNV News, Sister Colette discussed food preservation and canning techniques. Sister Colette, when did you start canning?
Okay, one of my favorite questions to answer. Well, to say when I first started canning, I have to qualify how I learned how to can in the first place. So just briefly, I'm an MGT, so I'm a registered member of the Nation of Islam. Okay, and so the sisters, the females in the Nation of Islam, we have 7 training units, and those training units are how to keep house, how to rear our children, how to take care of our husbands, sew, cook, and just in general, how to act at home and abroad. And so approximately the year 2015, 16, around thereabouts, we were in our cooking curriculum. And so the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who is the absolute head of our class, okay, yes. He gave us the instruction to learn the skill of canning. And so that's how it began.
Recently, I spoke with GlobalView contributor Brian E. Muhammad, Final Call news writer, who discussed the fear and uncertainty in Afghanistan as troops depart. And you give us some information as to what is happening in Afghanistan.
Wow. Well, you know, the United States have just removed themselves from Afghanistan. And I would really say they were put out of Afghanistan as the latest empire that lost a war. You know, Afghanistan is known throughout the world as the graveyard of empires. And the United States went in 20 years ago, as we know, and it has now come out defeated, deflated, you know, and it's going to be a new chapter for Afghanistan. But certainly another chapter in terms of how the U.S. government is going to handle this public embarrassment of such a loss.
Sister Sherry Muhammad, founder and director of Asiatic Minds Online School, and Sister Kimberly Muhammad, English instructor, discussed how Asiatic Minds English class will improve students' communication skills and their English language proficiency. As Asiatic Minds curriculum and courses help students develop the necessary skills and abilities to build a bright future, how important is it for English language proficiency in students' success?
Once again, thank you for having us, Rosalind. And it's absolutely important, the proficiency of language, because after all, we were tricked by the English language into slavery. And so in order for us, our students, to progress in any subject that they want to do, they must understand and be proficient in the language in which they speak. That way they can articulate their thoughts properly, their feelings and emotions, and they can also understand others and be able to pick up on the nuances if there is something not quite right and incorrect words are being used. So it is absolutely important, that proficiency piece.
Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors. Then Dr. Akili Muhammad will join us for his weekly medical update. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness, as well as the greatness of our people, and upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Call now, 502-219-4848.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
The hashtag Bank Black social media campaign made strides not only in revolutionizing how we bank, but also how we think. The movement inspired thousands of African Americans across the country to transfer or deposit millions of dollars into Black-owned banks. These are banks that will invest in urban communities, employ African Americans, support Black businesses, and inspire Black home ownership. This is a very proud moment for our culture as we are taking small, but significant, steps towards building Black power through Black wealth.
Thank you for tuning in to NNV News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, National Network View. This is Clifton Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
As questions arise over who is spreading the virus, and scientists from around the world are saying natural immunity is superior to the vaccine, public confidence erodes and fears of losing jobs rise. Here with us to discuss further is medical contributor Dr. Akili Muhammad with the Ultimate Wellness Group. Greetings, sir.
Greetings. How are you?
Well, sir, thank you. Now, Dr. Akili, New York has had public rallies in addition to healthcare workers not desiring to deliver babies over vaccine mandates. What does this speak to?
You know, from my vantage, I think it's two separate issues. I think it is one of the first signs of unity amongst healthcare workers that are not willing to subjugate themselves to a vaccine that they are still highly questioning. And I think the other view that I have is that we're looking at this medical community start to prioritize what they think should be prioritized and kind of push to the side what they don't prioritize. And one of those things will probably be childcare. And so I think as a Black community, as poor people in general in this country, we have to start thinking from the idea that the majority of births around the world happen without a hospital. So midwives and doulas and things of these natures need to be investigated by people, as well as the idea that having a baby in a more healthy environment, because it's not necessarily a healthy environment to have a child in a hospital because of all the possible things that can go wrong. But childbirth is very important. Childbirth is something that not only do humans around the world do without hospitals, but so do animals. And so I think we have to start changing our mind as we see the climate of the health system start to change.
Yes, sir. Many scientists from around the world are also saying that natural immunity is superior to the vaccine. Should that boost our confidence?
I definitely think it should if it is given to people in a way that they can ingest it. You know what I mean? Because there's been so much misinformation, disinformation, and just straight lies that have happened since this pandemic has started. I'm not sure that people really know what to trust or how to trust anymore. But one of the things that's very important when people do listen is that your God-given immune system cannot be matched. And when we're talking about a spike protein vaccine, if we can call it that, versus your immune system, which tears the entire plasmid of that virus apart and looks at each section, that's an immunity that's on a different level. And it's proving with all the scientists around the world that what you were given by God is superior than anything that man can do. That sounds like a statement that we should know by common sense, but we have been inundated with information probably most of our lives that make us think otherwise.
Right. And can you explain why that is factual? But in addition to that, can you explain or can you pinpoint where in our history did we, I guess, a turning point where we went from relying so heavily on home remedies and natural remedies that have carried us throughout centuries to just relying 100% on man-made medicine?
Yeah, so I would say in my attempt to try to answer that question as well,
Yes.
I would say it happened somewhere between the 1940s to the 1960s.
Okay.
Because, I remember talking to my grandmother and she said that she had never gone to a grocery store until she was 49. And she was born in 1905. I remember my mother telling me and my aunts that their doctors told them that Similac and Enfamil was better than the breast milk and that birth control pills were good. At that time, there were doctors on television that were saying smoking was healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's somewhere in that 20-year period, there began to be this change in suggesting things to the public and specifically Black people that was not our norm, because our people, like you finished mentioning, as well as the natives to this country, Mexicans and other indigenous people, we went to the earth, we went to nature, we went to something that we could get from our environment. But we didn't go to a drugstore. We didn't go to a pharmacist. We didn't go to a doctor. We had ways that we dealt with most things. And that was lost when the Rockefellers took over medicine in the early 1900s. And so their influence in medicine and then the entity of marketing to people, I think, completely changed our reality. And now we have, of course, the general Black population and general people in general public will say things like, I have such and such, let me go take something, or let me go to the pharmacy, or let me go to the store to get something. We've lost that connection. And so based on my research, I think it was somewhere in that time frame.
Yes, sir. Where are physicians on this immunity subject? Is it pretty much split down the middle? What are you seeing or hearing?
I don't really know if it's split down the middle, because although, the mainstream media, and even out of Biden's mouth the other day when he had his statement about the new mandates, his statistics were extremely false. I remember him saying something to the fact that 70-something% of the healthcare workers around the country are vaccinated. And that is far from the truth based on my research. It's really the opposite. It's somewhere around 30% that are vaccinated. And so what I'm seeing is a lot of physicians are becoming wary, because we can decipher a lot of the information that's coming from mainstream media. But when you get information, one of the things that you do is you turn to your patient population and you start trying to see what is the truth based on what you're seeing. And so many physicians are becoming extremely they're not being able to rely on the information anymore, because what they're seeing and what they're hearing are sometimes opposites. And so I think the general physician who actually does do some research and try to think their way through things, I think they're starting to lose confidence in the vaccine. And then others that are ignorant, that never want to do anything but be part of the system, they're not going to change. They're going to 100% support the vaccine because that's all they believe they know.
Good point. Now, do you have any suggestions to those who are living in fear of losing their jobs due to vaccine mandates?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it may be a little strange for some people. It may be a different habit, but I think it's time really for people to gird their loins and stand on their principles, stand on what it is that you believe, regardless of the circumstances. Because, and that may be difficult for some people, because I think a lot of times when we look at the civil rights movement, when we look at a lot of the different movements that have happened around the world, it hardly ever was the majority of people. It's usually a minority. It's usually a younger generation that really put their all into revolutionary change. A lot of people benefit from it, but if you're a beneficiary and you didn't do any work, then you don't have the same fervent appreciation that a person that put their life on the line. And so my suggestion to people is, first of all, do the research in your state so that you can find out whether there's personal, religious, or medical exemptions in your state. Because there still are a majority of states that do allow 1 or 2 or 3 out of those 3. So do your research, figure out what it is that you want to do, how do you want to stand, and then start to look in your community to see who's with you, who's thinking like you. And let's start to unify, because this government will not stand. This country will not stand if there are enough people who say, no, we're not going to do that. And we're going to stand together against this. This country would crumble if that would happen. People would walk out of the federal jobs, walk out of the healthcare jobs, walk out of the state jobs because they don't want to be mandated. This country will come to a screeching halt in a very short period of time.
Yes, sir. Well, Dr. Akili, with that being said, would you say that fear is just as instrumental as the facts that are coming out about the coronavirus?
To be honest with you, I think fear is a larger percentage of the problem, right? Like I was talking to somebody recently that in 2020, there were still more people that died from heart attacks than died from the coronavirus. And so if they were inundating us with information all day, every day about heart attacks, starting tomorrow, everybody would be worried about a heart attack by the end of the year. So it's about inundation of information. Now, I won't exclude the fact that healthcare workers have been overworked. It's a bend on the healthcare system in general. And of course, it's showing that the healthcare system is inadequate to handle extreme situations. But the point that I'm getting to is that with the number of people that have gotten an infection versus the number that have died, we shouldn't be so enthralled in fear, because there are other things that are occurring in this country as we speak that are killing more people than the coronavirus infection. So I think fear is a bigger part of the negativity.
Yes, sir. And finally, Dr. Akili, what is new with the Ultimate Wellness Group?
Well, on that same subject of what can people do, we'll be discussing tonight on the Ultimate Wellness Group Transformation Tuesday, your ability to do the personal, religious, or the medical exemptions. That's what we'll be discussing this evening with a lawyer who has extensive research in these areas. And so if you have the time and you'd like, come on to blackstream.live/TUWG and join us for a wonderful conversation this evening, 8 p.m. Eastern Time.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Akili, as always, and we look forward to hearing more from you next week.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors. Coming up, GlobalView contributor and Final Call News staff writer Brian E. Muhammad will speak with us about the history of the United States harmful foreign sanctions. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call Radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the Listen Live button or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
U.S. deadly sanctions around the globe may be a weapon of war that cripples nations and deprives them access to essential goods and services. Joining us to discuss is GlobalView contributor and Final Call newspaper staff writer Brian E. Muhammad. Greetings, sir.
Greetings, Sister Rosalind.
Yes, sir. Brother Brian, how many nations does the United States have under sanctions?
In all, the United States have 39 nations under sanctions.
Wow.
Yeah.
What percentage of those U.S. sanctioned nations are on the continent of Africa?
Well, that's a good question, because out of all of the nations on the earth, it's pretty much predominantly the darker nations that are sanctioned. Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about Africa, Africa makes up 1/3 of the 39, a third of the total number of nations America has under sanctions are in Africa alone.
Wow. What is the purpose of America's sanctions?
Sanctions has been a part of America's, what I would describe as a very fiendish policy, and really to maintain a foreign presence and a posture as a global thug. That's what I would describe America as on the world stage. The purpose of the sanctions for the United States is to use it as a weapon to hurt the people of these nations, even though it's against international law, it's against precedents that are statutes that the United States also signed on to themselves. it's designed to hurt the everyday people in hopes that they will foster so much dissatisfaction. It's like manufactured dissent, you know, cause enough dissent in the society that the people would rise up against the leadership of that country. And because a lot of these sanctions are tied to an agenda of regime change, America overthrowing governments or leaders that they don't like.
Now, is America using these sanctions as a weapon of war by pushing nations into a corner and preventing them access to certain essential goods and services?
Yeah, you know, people, analysts who have become pretty much honest and open about what we're really dealing with term what America is doing as economic terrorism, economic warfare. And it's like America killing without firing a shot, you know, because many of these sanctions causes conditions that undermines the general welfare of the people. And, you know, and when you start talking about things that can't get in, like medicines and essential other things like food stuffs and whatnot, trade, especially along the healthcare, it has caused death. In Venezuela, between 2017 and 2018, it is reported that sanctions may have been the cause of up to 40,000 people's deaths in Venezuela.
Oh.
This is America.
Now, Brother Brian, why did President Trump overturn President Obama's decision to remove sanctions on Cuba?
You know, Cuba is a very interesting situation. You know, there's a whole population of Cubans that live in the United States that left Cuba, was put out of Cuba, was ran out of Cuba at the change of Cuba in 1958 under the Cuban Revolution led by Fidel Castro and others. And they have had this hatred against Cuba ever since. These were the Jews, some of the bloodsuckers of the poor. These are the ones that ran all kinds of decadent businesses on the island of Cuba. Because in those years, Cuba was the filthy playground of the rich Americans, you know? So those people who benefited from that financially and was put out of business came to America and been here ever since. And they've been lobbying and working to undermine every year. They've been undermining the government of Cuba and whatnot. And this is where we had the sanctions. Ever since 1958, there has been sanctions embargo on Cuba to hurt the communist government or the government led by Fidel Castro at the time. And so, yeah. But to answer your question, why did he overturn it? Because he was pushed to overturn it. In the US politics, you know, Israel and Cuba enjoyed the same thing, more of what you call bipartisan support in terms of, you know, not support, but in terms of opinion. Both Republicans and Democrats fell into the what you call the idea that Cuba should be overthrown. You know, Obama had a different idea for a number of reasons, and even the sanctions that he relaxed, he didn't go all the way.
Right.
I'll give him some credit because he's our brother and Black folks love him. But when it's all said and done, he did minimal, but it was enough that there was hope that, you know, that trade will come and other people will begin to engage in Cuba who was blocked from engaging because of the embargo. And Trump overturned that partly because he wanted to overturn anything that the previous black president did before him. But this is always the MO of America where Cuba was concerned, the position that Trump actually took.
Now, Cuba has shown, and we were speaking with Dr. Akili in the previous segment, about COVID-19, and it's just wreaking havoc across the world. But Cuba has shown its expertise in medicine and is helping its citizens, as well as citizens in other countries, combat the virus. Is America forcing Cuba and other sanctioned nations to band together?
Well, yes, on both counts. The Cuban healthcare system there, they were able to develop treatments and, you know, and a vaccine on their own. I believe that they would have done it anyway, even if they never were under sanctions, because that seems to be the strength of the Cuban people, this kind of self-sufficiency. But being that they were under sanctions, you know, they, like other nations, for example, in Iran, who also produces its own vaccines, you know, they can't go to the world market like, you know, like other nations because of these sanctions. So yes, the United States is forcing them to continue to do for self. And to answer the second part of that question, is also causing foes, geopolitical foes of America to come together, because we're Venezuela, who's an enemy to America, Cuba and others in that region, who America deemed as enemies. They are forced to deal with other nations that will deal with them. So now you find deals being made between Cuba, Venezuela, and Iran, and China, and Russia, all foes of America. But America, you bringing this on yourself because of your wicked actions. You thinking you're going to squeeze the economy, or as Richard Nixon said one time, make their economy scream until, you know, until again the people rise up. But they find alternatives. As Donald Menslow's Farrakhan said, you know, Sister Rosalind, he said that creativity, adversity rather, is the mother of creativity.
Right. That's right. Now, Brother Brian, were sanctions reimposed on Iran? You mentioned Iran in your answer to the last question. Were they reimposed on Iran after Trump backed out of the Iranian nuclear deal?
Yeah, that was one of the things that he did, that his administration did, and it was in hopes of squeezing Iran. And not just squeezing Iran, but squeezing the rest of the world, because the way these sanctions are set up, if other countries do business with Iran, then they have to pay a hefty price to America. America is the #1 economy. So, and America is the #1 military. So America walks around like one big gangster. I mean, this is the way he operates.
Yeah.
You know, America is, you know, so yes, they put these sanctions on, and they did it in such a way where other nations had to break deals with Iran. And Iran, you know, and some of these deals was that they will continue to do business, buy oil, do business with Iran under the 2015 nuclear deal. See, and that's what everybody's trying to get back to. But now, because America has done so much damage over the last 5 years with these reimposing of sanctions or whatnot, it's very difficult to do what President Biden is talking about doing, returning to the table of, of the nuclear pact that they made, the pact that they made in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be a cakewalk. You're just going to walk back in. You can't betray me, punch me in the nose, and then talking about, look, let's be pals now. It don't work that way.
Right. And Brother Brian, before we close out today, there's one very important matter that I want to make sure we get your insight on. In the news recently, we've seen that thousands of Haitian refugees are under a bridge along the US-Mexican border in Texas. Others were seen waiting through the Rio Grande in the United States.
Yeah.
What are the factors that have led to this recent influx of Haitian refugees?
It's insecurity on the ground in Haiti. It's they're not sure. The Haitian people took major hits over the summer when you talked about the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse, and then after that, in the middle of all of that 7.2 earthquake that was devastating there, and then what's been going on as well, these so-called gangs on the ground who are vying for power and influence, and it becomes very violent and volatile in the society. So that type of insecurity and uncertainty is driving more people to leave Haiti.
Is it safe to say that there may be a particular agenda at work or at play when it comes to the country of Haiti?
Yeah, because it seemed, I get you, because it seemed like there's this massive instability all the time.
Right.
And yes, the real problem in Haiti, no matter what the nuances of issues in front of us on the ground, like every day, is a recalcitrant white supremacist agenda that has been at play ever since Haiti overthrew its slave masters and came and developed into a republic of itself. It's the only place that went from slavery right to being an independent republic, beating all of the major white supremacists, France, America, I think the Dutch, I forget, but I have to look up if that's correct, but they beat these enemies. So white people, white supremacists, white world supremacy said never again. And they will never get on their feet, and they will never be an example to be remembered. So they want us to not tell the story of Haiti, of how it became a republic, the resilience of the people. They don't want the rest to, because if we know that, then all of the countries in the Caribbean that still beholden to Queen Elizabeth and all these people will say, look, we can break free and be our natural black selves. Others throughout the world, all the way to Africa, will be able to say, from the example of the historical move that Haiti made, we can do the same. And white people right now, white supremacy is losing as it is. Don't get it twisted. America is moving just on this sheer military might, but white world supremacy is taking a big L everywhere they go. They lost in Afghanistan, they lost in Vietnam, and they're destined not to win another war. And her brothers in Europe is not going to win any wars. They'll be killing each other soon. But they don't want the example of black self-determination and the successful example of Haiti to ever be in the forefront of our minds and certainly in the forefront of our hearts.
Yes, sir. Brother Brian, as always, every week, we thank you for your insight and your information about the world at large. We look forward to hearing more from you next week.
Thank you, Sister Rosalind.
Yes, sir. And thank you for joining us today and tuning into National Network View News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, NNV News. This is Rosalind Parks with National Network View News. Good night.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.